Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, bringing you another book review from the Most Wanted series. We got special edition number 3, Trick or Trap. I'm not gonna lie guys, this book took a while to finish. It is broken in 4 parts. It is definitely one of the longer solo stories that Goosebumps has to offer. This thing's like 160 pages. So it takes a while to get through it, given how slow the pacing is of the book, but we'll get to that near the end when I get into the review part. So let's talk about Trick or Trap. What's the story about? Okay, well, Trick or Trap is a Halloweenish story. Don't let the cover fool you. It's not about zombies and trick or treating. There is a haunted house though, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the story takes place around Halloween. It involves a kid named Scott Harmon and his best friend Amanda Gold. They are tormented by these 3 bullies, Kenji, Mickey, and Morty. These 3 kids are constantly pestering these 2 kids because these 2 kids are just easy to scare, and the bullies get off on scaring them because it's funny. And the first part of the book is kind of building up the idea that Scott and Amanda are basically wimps. And then the second part of the book happens basically where Scott and Amanda knuckle up and they go into a haunted house. And they're looking around this haunted house, and then something weird happens with a trap door. And Scott finds this creepy wooden mask. And this is where I thought in the story it was going to get kind of like Haunted Mask-ish, but we didn't get that at all. Then I thought maybe it was going to be like Jim Carrey's The Mask. We didn't get that at all either. As we'll find out later on, that this mask is something sinister. But we'll get to that in a moment. So Scott finds his mask and he steals it from this house, which you should never do. You should never steal anything. But I guess what happens in the story is a testament and kind of like a just cause or a rightful punishment for what happens when you steal something that's not yours. You're bound to get punished in some way. So Scott realizes that after putting this mask on, this mask kind of like takes you to another dimension. He can see and hear people, but they can't hear him. Also, what he sees is a completely different reality, and that petrifies him. So he has to muster up the strength to pull the mask off to go back to the real reality. All the while, when he got the mask, there's this strange odor and this purple mist that we'll see later on in the story. But it's very eerie and very spooky, and why this mask was put away in this haunted house, like basically hidden. Scott, worries about that. So after putting it on a second time with his sister trying to show her the mask, he decides to hide it. He hides it in his closet, and then part 3 comes around where Scott goes out to a graveyard, and it was very muddy, and he rolls around in mud, and he comes home, and he goes to put his muddy clothes in his closet, and this weird old lady appears in his room. And this old lady says that he's his great aunt Ida coming to visit, and she leaves, and then it's revealed that Aunt Ida never came to visit whatsoever. So that freaks Scott out, and he tells Amanda, and Amanda says, well, we got no time for this, we got to build this Halloween party. And the Halloween party's based around the idea that they were going to do that to scare the 3 bullies, get their revenge. Then part 4 comes around, the party comes on Halloween, and Scott and Amanda, with the help of Scott's little sister Rita, have worked on this haunted house, and Rita was supposed to wait upstairs and do the sounds throughout the house and whatnot. And the bullies come over, and a bunch of weird stuff starts happening that they didn't plant, like scares. Then it comes to there's a realization that the 3 bullies had also gone in the house and planted their own scares of themselves. And then Scott was like, okay, you got me. And then, of course, the initial scare that involved Rita happened, and not everything was as it seemed, and then there's a big villain reveal, who this villain was, and the story then goes to the ending, when Scott goes back home and sees that something is wrong, very wrong, and story fades to black. So, let's talk about the review part now. There's a lot of problems with this book. Okay, there's three main problems I have. Number one, Scott himself as a character. Scott is probably one of the least identifiable characters I think ever written in a Goosebumps book. If not, definitely the second most dislikable character you're supposed to dislike. He's kind of like a Seth Gold from Click, from the very first Tales to Give You Goosebumps book. He's just like that character. You're supposed to not like that character. And you want something bad to happen to Scott, because he's just he's kind of a dunce. He's everything he does, he's always outwitted. He's always beaten to the punch. His ideas are kind of uninspired. And he's just a wimp. And you're just like, come on, like get it going, man. But it never happens. That's the first complaint. Second complaint I have is that the pacing on this book, for 160 pages, this was definitely one of the easiest books where you'll read 20 pages and you put it down and you won't touch it for a few days and you'll come back, read 20. It took me over a week to finish this thing because it just got so super boring. I was finding myself falling asleep in like parts 2 and 3. Part 4 was pretty good for the most part, but 2 and 3 by far are some of the most boring characterization building chapters in Goosebumps history. Now, it does offer good characterization, and it does build atmosphere, which kind of helps the overall rating on this book when I get to the official rating. I did like the atmosphere. I did like the effort that in the writing that took it to that slow pace. It was building it up, and then the pressure releases at the end. But here's another problem, the third problem. The end itself. It's not that the ending is bad. The very last chapter is actually a pretty satisfying ending. But the last 3 chapters, there's a big villain reveal. And that villain reveal is super rushed. I mean, there's a context that needs to be said. There's some origin and some backstory that needs to be addressed because we have no idea how this person ended up the way they did. It's all up to the imagination. And that's a problem to a book that's this length. You would think that they would go through that effort to put a little origin for the villain. That really hurt like my perception of the villain and my taking of the villain. I just felt like the whole ending was just thrown at you and spat at you, and you were supposed to just inhale it all in. I mean, that's how it felt. Also, the villain reveal, I saw that coming from a mile away. It was so predictable. It wasn't even like that scary, but the imagery was there. There was very descriptive imagery. The scene with the stairs in part 4, very, very terrifying. The scene in Scott's house when he encounters the old woman, that's pretty visually haunting. You stumble across a complete stranger in your house. That's actually real life horror. That can actually happen to you. So that's pretty scary. It's really relatable horror. But this thing took forever for me to finish. So now we're going to get into the grading here. Off the bat, the pacing of this book. I don't mind a slower paced book, but for how boring the middle part of this book really was, and how much it further cemented my dislike for Scott, on top of that, I had to deduct a full point off from 5, so it's already down to a 4. Just for that, Scott and the pacing of this book really tanked the grade of this book. I wish I can give this a better rating. This is, one of the special editions. You're hoping that the story is going to be a standout story. Also, the cover is misleading, so I deducted 0.1 for that. You know, I'm not a big, you know, believer that the cover is supposed to draw you into a book. But I actually bought this because it looked like monsters on Halloween. This cover is definitely misleading on that aspect, so I had to give it a point off. So we're at 3.9. And then I had to deduct points for the villain reveal and how rushed that felt. The ending was fine, the very ending, but the villain part in the last 3 chapters really tanked the grade even further. And I deducted another 0.3 off for that because it was rushed. There needed to be more. You know, it's not like I'm wishing for more. No, there needed to be more. So I deducted 0.3 off. So we're at 1.4 points off. So from a scale from a 0 to a 5, I gave this a 3.6. It's average. It's an average Goosebumps book. I mean, it's for what you're gonna pay for this thing. What is it? $8 if you bought this at like a Barnes and Noble or Books A Million. I would say buy this cheaper used online if you need it to fill your collection. If you just want a nice copy, you know, you might just go buy it from the bookstore for that price. But you could probably get it way cheaper on Thrift Books or eBay. I definitely wouldn't pay the $8 for this because the story, it's just not that good. I mean, given the hundreds of Goosebumps books out there, this book is just not that memorable. I mean, it's just an average book. I mean, it's readable. It's definitely rereadable if you want to go back and maybe, because it's so boring, I could probably go back and reread some parts that I completely forgot I read. And I know I read every page of this book. I could probably remember 80% of this book because 20% of it is pretty much unneeded filler. So it gets a 3.6. It's just an average rating. And it's disappointing because Zombie Halloween from Most Wanted got a 4.9, which was an excellent book, and I was high hopes for this Trick or Trap one, and man, this book fell flat for me. So let me know what you guys thought. Did you guys like Trick or Trap? Did you guys think it was even worse than I said it was? Or did you guys think it was better than I said it was? I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. I'm currently finishing up a few other books, so I'm going to try to get to those as soon as possible. So stay tuned for those next books reviews. And until next time, I'll see you later.